Hello 3E. Today we're going to do a lesson on indirect and direct taxes. So we've already learned a little bit about direct taxes in our last lesson. So we'll start going through the note here and you can follow along with me. So direct taxes, HST and GST are example of what we call direct taxes. Direct taxes are always evident when you conduct a transaction. For example, when you purchase something, we know that there is tax added to the initial price. HST and GST are examples of what we call direct taxes. So this is always something that's added after that we actually need to go ahead and do a calculation for, kind of how we did in our last lesson. Another common type of direct tax that we haven't looked at yet would be property tax. So this is tax paid to the municipal government, and it's a percentage of the value of the property. And the amount of percent that we pay is dependent on the type of property it is. So we'll take a look at the three different types there are below. So there's something called residential, and this means homes. So this would be the value and how much our home is worth. And then we could go ahead and calculate the percent based on that. Commercial. So commercial means things like workplaces, businesses, stores. And then the last one would be industrial. So this is more like factories and warehouses. So the places where things are made that would then go to these commercial stores. So you can see that the rates are different, dependent on the city as well as dependent on the type of property. So if it's residential, commercial, or industrial. So we'll refer back to this chart. These are kind of three big cities near us here in Aylmer. And they'll help us do the examples later on. So property taxes are paid directly to the city, and it often happens on a quarterly schedule. So rather than paying kind of a monthly bill like we usually do our phones, we often pay quarterly, which means it's 4 times a year that we pay. And often people will set it up to automatically come out with their mortgage. And then it gets paid to the city kind of quarterly. So it kind of adds up as we take it out with our mortgage, and then they kind of deal with paying. That way it doesn't suddenly seem like a lot coming out of your pocket 4 times a year. So what types of services do you think property tax covers? So I've listed 4 here. So some things it covers are public education. So without our taxpayer money, we wouldn't be able to build schools and have all of the resources that we do here in our education system. Firefighting is another one. Local police, libraries, and so on. There's lots of different things, but those are kind of 4 big ones. Now if you go on to the next page here, so now indirect taxes. So this is something we have not looked at all yet. So indirect taxes are taxes that are included in the selling price of an item. So this means we don't actually have to go add anything on afterward. We don't need to calculate that HST or GST and then add it on because it's already kind of hidden in the price that we see right there on the price tag. So some examples of things that have this already built-in hidden kind of tax are cigarettes. So in Ontario, the tax added is approximately 13.975 cents per cigarette. So a little, like somewhere between 13 and 14 cents per every cigarette. So that works out if you're calculating what a pack of 20 cigarettes would be. That means for about $2.80 of that would be hidden taxes. And then on top of these already built-in taxes, cigarettes also get HST. So we would calculate that on top of it. So there's quite a few taxes there for cigarettes. And the same here with gasoline. So when we fill up our cars and our trucks with gas, the price that we're seeing at the gas station, there is a tax on that, but it doesn't get added on after. It's already built into that price. So it's collected both by the federal and provincial governments. These are kind of updated based in 2021. So the federal government collects 10 cents for every liter that we fill with gas. provincial collects 14.7 cents, and there's also a carbon tax of 8.8 cents. And those are all for every liter. So now we'll go on to some examples. So Chris owns a house that is assessed by the city to be worth $325,000. He currently lives in London. So what will his yearly property tax be? So we're going to want to go up because it did say a couple things. Let me highlight here. So he lives in a house. So that's going to be a residential type of property because it's his home. We're not going to look at commercial or industrial for this one. And it also tells us he lives in London. So we're going to need to look at the percentages for London. So we'll go up and do that. And we can see here for residential for London, we're looking at 1.35%. So let me just write this down here. So 1.35% is what we're looking to deal with, but we'll need to turn this into a decimal. So the same way that we would turn like our 13% HST into a decimal is we divide it by 100. So I'm just going to zoom in here a bit more so I can write better. 1.35 divided by 100 gives us 0.0135. So this is the decimal we're going to use in our calculations. So now we're going to take what his property is worth, which is that 325,000, and now we're going to multiply it by our decimal here, 0.0135. And when we do that, we get a grand total of $4,387.50. So that's how much tax he's going to be paying for his property in 1 year. So per year. If the city expects payments 4 times a year, so that would be quarterly, how much will each payment be? So we're now just going to want to figure out his quarterly payments, and we'll do that by dividing by 4. So we're going to take our 4,387.50 and divide that by 4 because it's happening 4 times a year, and that gives us 1,096 and 88 cents. And that'll be per payment. I'll use that as my T. Okay, so we'll move on to example 2. The current price of gasoline is $1.34 per liter. So how much of this price are the indirect taxes of the federal, provincial, and carbon? So those were listed above here for 10 cents, 14 cents, and 8 cents per liter. So we'll just need to add those up now. So we've got our 10 cents plus our 14.7 cents plus our 8.8 cents. And that will give us 33.5 cents. And if we want to change that into dollars, again, we divide by 100 or we move the decimal place to the left. So that'll give us 33 cents there. Or we could even round that to 34 since there is that 5 there. Okay, and now it wants to know what percent of the price per liter is this tax. So we know that the price per liter up here listed is the $1.34, and we know that 34 cents of that is taxes. So we want to know, well, what percent does that make up of the whole? So we're going to do that by, let me just write out a little kind of formula here. So percent is going to equal our tax. So we take the tax that we got and divide it by our total price. So our tax was 0.34, so around 34 cents. And our total is 1.34. And when we do that, we should get about 0.25. And again, it wanted to know the percent, not the decimal. So we're going to change this into a percent, which is just 25%. So we got that by timesing by 100 or moving the decimal place 2 to the right. So the percent of the total price that's actually tax is 25%. All right, let's move on to our next question. So Mel is moving to St. Thomas. Her new house has an assessed value of $349,950. So we want to know her annual property tax, so that means yearly, and then also what her quarterly payments would be. So again, we're talking about a house, so another residential, as well as it's St. Thomas. That's another important part to keep in mind here when we're doing this question. So we're going to scroll up and figure out what percent are we dealing with when we're talking about property taxes for a home, so a residential in St. Thomas. So let's go and find out. So St. Thomas for residential is 1.55%. Oops, okay. So we're going to write out that now. So first we'll calculate annual. So we're going to take her total amount of her house, or the value of her house, and multiply that by our percent. So again, we need to change that percent to a decimal, and when we do, we will get this. 0.0155. So we divided it by 100, or we moved the decimal place 2 to the left, and that's what gives us that. And when we do that, we get 5,424 and 23 cents. And that is per year. So that is our annual. And now quarterly, we're just going to again divide that by 4 because she's paying this whole amount over the span of 4 different payments throughout the year. So we're going to have our 5,424 and 23 cents, and we're just going to divide that by 4, which tells us what our quarterly payments are, which are 1,356 and 6 cents. And that's per quarter. Okay, and our last example here. Lou bought a carton of cigarettes containing 200 cigarettes. How much indirect tax did he pay? So we're going to again go back up and look at what we know about our cigarette tax here. So we're told, let me highlight it here for us. We're told that it's approximately 13.975 cents per cigarette. And we're also told that that pretty much just works out to $2.80 for every 20 cigarettes that we're buying. So we could do this 2 ways, depending on which number we'd rather work with. If we'd rather work in the cents using the 13.975, or if we'd rather be working in dollars and thinking about groups of 20 cigarettes. So we'll do this both ways. And on your homework, you can kind of decide which way makes more sense to you and which way you'd like to do it. So we'll do method 1 using the cents. Method 1. So we know that it's 13.975 cents for every cigarette, and we're imagining that they're now buying 200 cigarettes. So we need to figure out how many cents is that altogether. So we're going to get that it's 2,795 cents. And again, generally we don't work in cents. We're going to change that to dollars, how we did above in one of our previous examples. So to change it, we divide it by 100 because there's 100 cents in a dollar. And we get that it's 27.95. And again, I'll just write what we did here. So from here to here, we divide by 100. Okay, and now we'll separate that and do method 2. So in this one, we know that it's $2.80 for every 20 cigarettes. So we can kind of make a ratio. And I know we did this a couple years ago when I was teaching you math. So maybe you'll remember it. So we're going to set up a ratio on both sides of the equal sign. So we know that it's $2.80 for 20. So we're putting the cost on the top and the number of cigarettes on the bottom. So we want to do the same thing over here. So the number of cigarettes we know we want to get to is 200, but we don't know the cost. This is kind of a question mark here. So instead of a question mark, what we're going to put in, let me see if I can erase this now, is an X. So we've built our proportions and our ratios. And now what we do is something called cross multiply, if you remember doing that. So it's where we multiply the top of this one with the bottom of that one, and then the bottom of this one with the top of that one, and then that gets rid of the fractions here. So really what we've got next is 280 times 200 on one side of our equal sign. And then we've got 20 times x, so you can just kind of put those together on the other side. So 280 times 200 is 560. And again, over here, we still just have our 20x. So now to get x by itself, right now it's being multiplied to the 20. So we would need to do the opposite of that and divide both sides by 20. So now on this side, we know that our 20s will cancel out, and now we just need to figure out what's 560 divided by 20. And when we do that, we're going to get that it's 28. Let me just see if I've got any room to write a little sentence here. So you can see whatever method you decide to do. In the first one, we got that it was 27.95, and over here we got that it was 28. So those numbers are very close. They're only off by 5 cents. So whichever method you liked doing better is the one that you can do when you're doing the homework. Let me just add a dollar sign here because we are talking about, we are talking about money here. Okay, and that wraps up our note for today. And now I will let you get started on the homework. Good luck.